hoping that it would be authentic and it would be specific. So when I did walk in the room, and they didn't give me the whole script, they just gave me the monologue that Gloria and Mike had written. It was so beautiful. It was so layered. It was like a person, and it wasn't like, let me just be funny, because that's what I'm not a big fan. I wasn't a big fan of like sitcoms. I was back in the day. I loved the 80s sitcoms. But it's like, you know, a joke, there's no story. There was a story here. I didn't know Gloria. I didn't know Mike. I didn't know Brent. I just knew that white hat, which was Norman Lear, right? And all I thought was, I've seen his shows. I grew up with these shows. And I got to go for it. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to give it my all. If that's not what they want, I'm not right for this part, you know, because I certainly don't want to be in any boxes. Yes. We all know what kind of boxes they put us in. The over-sexualized Latina, the asexual cop, the suffering mother, or, you know, the smart-ass friend.
Girlfriend we were talking about earlier.
So the fact that I got this, and I thought, oh my God, this is written with an authentic voice, Gloria's voice. Listen, I love Mike, and Mike is a genius, but three white guys don't know what to do when it comes to telling our stories. So they struck gold when they, you know, got this one right here.
Yes. How intimidating, or what was your first experience with Rita, someone who we all know? And
I had worked with her before. She forgot that she worked with me. So I worked with her 3 times before. She's like, oh, really? No. I love Rita. She doesn't remember me in the past. She remembers me now. How was it working? How was it for you, my love?
I knew, obviously, that she had no West Side Story, but I didn't connect it. So I just kind of walked in the room and met her and was like, great, let's do this thing. And then people started asking me about Rita Moreno, and I'm like, oh, Rita, did you know that you're a big deal? People ask me about you a whole bunch. What's up with that? And then I started looking into her, and I was like, oh, thank God I didn't know. Thank God I didn't know, because I would have been so intimidated. And same with Norman. When I went in for my chemistry read, I was at Sony Studios, and somebody walked by and was like, is Norman Lear in there? And I was like, who?
Yeah.
Norman Lear with the hat. And I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know who's in there, and if they're wearing a hat. And then I was like, oh, you're a big deal too. Cool. But I'm glad I got to know them as people before I got to know them as legends, because now I get to work with them as an artist and not as a fan, which I think could have been very limiting for me.
I want to ask you, Isabella, your character, Elena, doesn't just deal with coming out on the show, but also a host of issues. Discrimination based on the color of your skin, accents, ethnicity, among other things. The show also addresses issues of immigration, which we saw kind of at the end, a nod to our president. How does this ring true to your own experience? You were originally from Colombia.
Yes. Well, actually, I grew up with a lot of privilege. I realized that I was white passing while we were doing the white passing episode. I read the script and I said, that's what that is. Cool. You all might know Ariella Barrera, who plays Carmen in the first season. Ariella and I are very close, and we always talk about the experience in the industry and in life, and she's always like, yeah, this happened to me, and people were like this because I'm Latinx, blah, blah, and I was like, that's so silly. What? I didn't know. What? And then I realized that doesn't happen to me because I'm lighter, and people didn't realize that I was Latinx. So it's been very different for me. I also moved from Colombia to Florida, Orlando, Florida, where we're all Latinx. We're all Puerto Ricans, Colombian. Like, it was never a thing until I got onto this show. I went to high school in Santa Clarita and was with a lot of Caucasians for a long time, and that's the first time that I was like, oh, I'm different. And then I got on this show and started like educating myself and being like, oh, well, this is my privilege and this is why it's been like this. But I was talking to them about it today. Once people realized that I was in fact Latinx and my last name is Gomez, my auditions were cut in half. And the roles started being the Latinx this, or drug addict this, and I was like, that's so I've started seeing it more as a grown-up, but thankfully growing up, I did grow up in a little bit of a bubble of privilege where I got to be very proud of my heritage.
I wanted to ask too, your character has also clearly struck a chord with a lot of Latinx and LGBTQ fans who've written me letters and have been, on social media talking about that. Tell us a little bit about that experience, that kind of closeness that people get in watching this.
It's so rewarding, and it's not only with me. Justina gets them all the time too about war veterans and PTSD and anxiety and depression, and I think it speaks a lot to the writing of the show because we're telling real stories that have happened to people. And as an actor, like Justina, you just want to work. I was like, a lead role, okay, I'll do a series regular, heck yeah. But to be able to be a character that's layered and a full human, and not only that, but be Latinx and LGBTQ and still be seen as a human, is so rewarding. And then to have that affect people's real lives and have them feel close to you and have them feel seen and helped because of something that I get to do and that I'm very privileged to do is more than I could have ever dreamed for.
Touched on this a little bit, but about the kind of characters you get based on what's happening in Hollywood, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, but there's been so much talk about the progress and Me Too and kind of women and what's happening in not only your industry but in politics. But a recent study came out during the 2017-2018 season that said women still only made up 27% of the key decision makers behind the scenes, from showrunners to creators to directors to producers. And it's actually a percentage behind where it was before, which I actually find pretty stunning because you think there's just this big movement happening. But I wanted to ask you, Gloria, and please feel free to weigh in too, but what do you think, what do you attribute to that? What needs to change?
Every year, I think networks and studios, look, they're trying to stay alive. Like, to be fair, I think the networks are trying to stay alive. Nobody's watching them the way they used to. I mean, everyone used to watch CBS, NBC, ABC. The 3 networks, and everyone would sit and watch. Now there's 400 channels, and there's 800 shows, and there's so much content to watch. So they're fighting for their lives. And in doing so, I think they've sort of done this pan show where every year it's the same shows, but different people from other shows that you also recognize in those shows. They're so worried about taking a risk. And when they do take a risk for something like The Good Place, which I think is an excellent network show, incredibly inclusive, very smart, very funny. Brooklyn Nine-Nine that they saved from Fox, incredibly inclusive, very, very funny, very, very good. These shows, America's Show, This Is Us, Superstore, they'll do it every once in a while, but then you're still going to get the same procedurals and the same kind of content that you see every year. So they're struggling to stay alive, which I appreciate. However, as a content creator, every year they buy stories about people of color, helmed by people of color. The want is there. They don't then always pick up those shows to pilot, and then of those they get picked up to pilot, they definitely don't often pick up those shows to series. So every year you're faced as a creator who is not just trying to entertain, but also trying to lift up various communities, which we try to do with LGBTQ veterans and Latinx on our show. All of my content includes that. I am very interested in stories of other, because it's interesting to me. I think it's interesting. And every year I think there is still a fight towards getting that narrative out there.
Tell us a little bit about the 50/50 by 2020 initiative that you're
Yeah, so I'm on the 50/50 by 2020 initiative. That came out of the Time's Up movement, and it was really focusing on Hollywood and the arts and entertainment and trying to have parity and equity in Hollywood, because the decision makers, the taste makers, are often older white men, which is fine, but they've had to say for a very long time. And the content ends up being a little dull as a result. If you get women and people of color in there, the content, because it's going to resonate differently with them. So I went with Jill Soloway and Amy Schumer and Constance Wu and a bunch of other badass women to UTA, which is our agency, and we said, hey, listen, we need there to be women and people of color that are agents, because you guys are determining who gets represented. And then of those people that get represented, these are the people that get jobs, and it is a pipeline that we need for you to open up. And they were incredibly responsive, as have many of the Hollywood agencies that we have gone to. So that initiative really focuses on equity because it will make for better content.
So what I do in the morning every day is try to peel the layers behind what's happening in politics, get into rooms that nobody else can get into. So I want to ask you guys the question, because this is what everybody's the most interested in what I do. Take us into, what does a diverse, interesting room that you're trying to create with your writers and with your cast, how is that different than some of the other experiences you all have had in Hollywood?
It's very different. I mean, I've been on a lot of shows, and I've done a lot of things. It's very different because first of all, it's like a family. We're telling our stories, they're authentic, they're specific, and it's like we're all collaborating. Okay, here we go.
Here you go, Congressman. Give Congressman Castro. Thank you so much.
I'll let y'all finish.
No. No, you
No, please, come on.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming to Washington. And thank you, Netflix, and each of you for your participation in this show. It really is a breath of fresh air because over the last few years, the Latino community really has been under assault. When the person at the top in our country paints an ugly picture, it makes it hard for a lot of people. And a lot of folks have suffered over the last 3 years. And, you know, in politics, the president has reduced Latino identity, or has tried to criminals and murderers and so forth. And one of the ways that you strike back at that and speak up against it is by doing what the folks in this show are doing, which is to portray the fullness of Latino life in this country. And, you know, I'm, of course, chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. And thank you. We have the largest membership ever, 38 members. And we're growing. We're 38 now. We'll be over 40, I think, next time. But part of the challenge is that over the years, in just about every major American industry, Latinos have been underrepresented. If you look at finance and law and medicine and, of course, media. In media, Latinos have been underrepresented in television and film. And oftentimes when we've been portrayed, it's been by a few stereotypes. It's been either as, my grandmother was a domestic worker for years, but oftentimes Latinos are presented as either a housekeeper or a drug runner or something that doesn't really account for the fullness of Latino life. So I think part of the reason this show is so special is because it does that, because it shows a Latino family and all the issues that you deal with as a regular family. And that's very special in this day and age to have that kind of show and to see it succeed on Netflix. Yeah. So I wanted to come most of all to say congratulations and thank you. So in your own way, I believe, speak up for who we are. Thank you all for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're really at it. Very grateful.
All right, well, I think before we do a couple questions, I wanted to just kind of, why don't we kind of go back to what you're saying? Because I think people are very interested in, like, no, I'm not Latino again. No, but talk a little bit about the difference between your experience on this show than maybe some of the other previous shows that you've
Well, I think we said it, or first of all, the show is very female friendly. Right, so we have a female showrunner, plus we have Mike Royce, you know, our male showrunner, and we have our allies. We have really important male allies that are real allies. And there is a collaborative situation on the show because we know this life, we've lived this life. Mm-hmm. So if somebody tells us, like, we can relate to the funeral episode. Who Latino cannot relate to that funeral episode? Where there's some bochinche going on. And, you know, who can relate to that? Where you go there to mourn, but you end up with some, you know, stories forever. So all of these stories that we get to tell in our authentic, specific, like I said, voice is what's important. We don't just get the shallow version, the superficial version, or what they think our story is. So that's what's important about this show. That's what makes this show so amazing. We can talk to each other. No one, you know, Isabella is a young, incredible actress. This is her first series regular, right? And she can go up to them and say something, and they don't say, "What do you know? You haven't been around." They listen to her, you know? So that's what's so beautiful about our set, is that we listen, we understand, and we know how important these stories that we're telling, we know how important it is. Because we know that we want to change that Latino narrative that's out there. You know? We don't want that out there, and especially now when brown people are under attack. So that's why this is so, to me, different than any other job.
And to add to that, I